Hello, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America. For many years, Rikers Island has made headlines for its culture of abuse, staff shortages, and dysfunctionality. Just last November, Damian Williams, a Manhattan-based prosecutor, asked the federal government to take away the city's control of the prison known for committing numerous human rights violations. So how did it get to this point? Joining us today to explain all of this to us is Stanley Richards, President and CEO of the Fortune Society, an organization committed to helping formerly imprisoned people reintegrate into communities. He was recognized by former President Obama as a champion of change for the work he does for those affected by the justice system and affected negatively by the justice system. Yeah. Stanley, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Carol.
For being here. I was calling you the miracle of the justice system because you are celebrated because you came into the Fortune Society as a formerly incarcerated person. And now you are the president and CEO running everything and making such a huge impact for so many other lives.
Yeah, thank you. My life has been a journey. I was born and raised in the Bronx in Soundview Projects. I lost my mother when I was 10 years old. I saw her and my father go to work, and only my father came home on December 10th, 15 days before Christmas. So it was a really dark time in my life that started my journey into the street. My father tried to hold us together as a family, worked really hard to keep us together. But I was in the streets. I joined gangs. I dropped out of school.
From 10 years old on?
From 10 years old. I joined gangs and dropped out of school and ended up going on the streets selling drugs, ended up being addicted to drugs, cycling in and out of jail. And I learned to live that life. I learned to believe that my destiny was what I was experiencing every day, which was drug addiction, streets, and jail. And so I cycled in and out for many, many years. And in my last incarceration in 1986, I spent a little over 2 years on Rikers Island adjudicating my case, was eventually sentenced to 4.5 to 9 years and went to prison. But when I went to prison, I went to school. I obtained my GED and I went to college and I graduated college. And that experience really laid the foundation for me to believe in myself and to see that my life could be different. And from that moment, I dedicated my life to wanting to show other people who were involved in the system, who thought their only options were the streets, prison, or death, that they have different options. They have powerful options, given the supports. And so when I came home, I applied for many jobs at many organizations that was doing this work. And Fortune was the organization that I say walk the talk. They hired me as a counselor.
So you started as a counselor. You were how old then?
I think I was 39,
yeah.
Something like that.
Well, the one thing is true, Stanley, is that you're very good at whatever you do. You're very good on the streets and all of that until you got caught and put away.
Right.
But then you defended yourself, went to school, did all of that. You excelled within the prison walls. And now you started with the Fortune Society 33 years later, working your way up the ladder, and now are, running the organization.
Amazing, amazing journey. But here's the truth of it, right? And this is one of the reasons why Fortune is an advocate, Fortune is a service provider, because we know another story, a story that's not often told in the papers or told in political conversations, and that is, I am not a miracle. There are thousands of men and women who have come home, who have turned their lives around, who are contributing members to their society, who are raising their family and contributing to their family. They picked themselves up from the ashes and built a life for them. And at Fortune, we see 11,000 people a year. Many people rebuild their lives and try to reclaim and rebound from the trauma of mass incarceration, the trauma of hopelessness, the trauma of economic isolation and depression. And they end up doing powerful things
And they're so lucky to have you as their spokesperson, standing up for them as well, because
Thank you.
you do a terrific job of it. When you came in, we were talking about the founder
Yes.
of the Fortune Society, David Rothenberg, who is still
Oh, David's
still engaged,
amazing.
but he
Yes.
started it 56 years ago, is that?
Yeah, he started
So-
it in 1967.
Right, and so I've known him for all of that time, from the time I started reporting. Now, here's the thing I said to you. When I started as a reporter, we would say a half century ago, whatever, we were trying to close Rikers Island. It is still open, and it is still an abomination. So, talk to us about, I know that there's some plan that now has put it at 2027. Is that when it's expected to close for good?
Yeah, well, a couple of things happened. As people really started finding voice and partnership to say Rikers Island must close, really started in a powerful way. I mean, it's been going on for generations and decades, calling for Rikers to close, as you just described. But when Khalif Browder committed suicide after his release, when he was arrested for allegedly stealing a book bag and spent years on Rikers Island and years in solitary confinement, and his abuse was witnessed on videos, and the trauma, that really put a face on what thousands of people who went through Rikers Island, including myself, have experienced for generations. And so now we have come as a city and said it's time to close Rikers, create a smaller system by creating borough-based jail systems to center the jails on the humanity of those who work there and those who are incarcerated.
Because it's bad for everyone.
It's bad for everyone. I got to tell you, I was the first deputy commissioner of the New York City Department of Corrections, first formerly incarcerated person to hold that post. My office overlooked the yard I used to walk in when I was in solitary confinement. And so as I walked in those facilities and I did that work, you can't help but see the trauma that happens, both for incarcerated people, for families, and for the officers and people who work there. It is a facility that is beyond repair.
Most people don't realize that it's as big as it is. It's on a 400-acre plot.
Yes.
That's hard to imagine, and it's 400 acres of hell for everyone concerned.
Absolutely. For officers, for incarcerated people, it's like we used to describe it when I was in the system. We used to describe it as you go over the bridge to nowhere. And when you go over that bridge, everything you love and everything you know is gone. You just leave it because you go into survival mode. You can't think about your family. You can't think about your community. You have to think about what's going on in the institution you're in. And that is true for our officers. One of the things I found is that officers, it was as a mother or a parent, when you go to work, you don't have contact with your child because you're in those facilities. You don't walk around with a phone. If something happens to your child, you can't just call your mother or your father and say something happened. You have to call the general office, and then they have to get in contact with the officer. So it is a system that creates hurt. And here's the commonality. The majority of the people who are incarcerated are black and brown. The majority of the people who work there are black and brown. And so this is trauma feeding trauma that creates generational trauma, not only for incarcerated people and their families, but for officers and theirs as well.
But let's talk a little bit about who these people are and what they've done. As I was driving here, I noticed that the Brennan Center has a new report out on misdemeanors, and what happens to people who've committed low-level offenses and the turmoil that they get into. And at Rikers, so many of the people who are there have not been convicted of anything. They're just waiting for a trial. Years.
Years. Over 80% of the people who are incarcerated on Rikers Island have not been adjudicated through a conviction. They are awaiting their day in court. The average length of stay for someone going to court is almost a year, meaning that we have people, if you're average, we have people who've been on the island for 3 years waiting for their case to get adjudicated. And that jail was never designed for long-term incarceration. That's a state prison sentence. 3-4 years. And so you have a system where the facilities are dilapidated, the people who are staying there excessive amounts of time. They are getting frustrated and angry. That anger shows up in those facilities. The recipient of that anger are officers. Officers are angry because they feel isolated and left out and experiencing trauma. Their frustration is leveraged at people who are incarcerated. And so it's a vicious cycle. And we've done some really good work as a city to try to address some of that. And let me put it in context. When I was in the system, there were 22,000 people incarcerated in New York City jails and hundreds of thousands of people going through the system. Today, while the numbers are going up and we're all concerned about that, we're at 6,200 people.
6,200, which
people.
is a dramatic drop.
Dramatic drop. And in a city of over 8 million people, right? In New York State, we had 72,000 people when I was in the system. We're down to 33,000. Between Governor Cuomo and Governor Hochul, 12 prisons got closed. Governor Hochul just committed to closing another 5 prisons. So we've made some progress. We shouldn't rest on the laurels and the progress we made. We got to keep pushing for a fair and truly just system. But we've come a long way, and we need to elevate that. And don't forget that we are the safest big city in this country. And we have a smaller footprint of criminal justice that we've had before. So let's continue to build on that progress. Don't do the fear-mongering. Don't do the most horrific crime defines criminal justice reform. Let's work to bring about true justice and elevate the communities who have been for far too long disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration.
So let's talk about the services that you provide to these 11,000 people a year. That involves training, or reconnecting them to their families, mental health, and housing, which is a huge, huge issue.
Yeah. One of the things, Fortune has really evolved out of experiences of the people who are walking through the door. We started housing because we were trying to place people in jobs, but they were coming home, they were homeless. And how do you maintain a job when you are living on the streets or living in a shelter? So we started housing in 2002. Right now, on any given night, we house over 800 people in safe, affordable, supportive housing, from emergency, transitional, to supportive and permanent housing. Housing is one of the most critical pillars for someone to come home and to rebuild their lives. There are sort of a couple of pillars that fit into that bucket. Housing is one, employment is another, substance abuse treatment and mental illness is another. And so Fortune provides those core services in addition to a host of other wraparound services like alternatives to incarceration, trying to reduce the footprint of how many people go in, safely managing them in the community, giving them services, groups, treatment, one-on-one counseling, employment to help them rebuild their lives. So Fortune is a one-stop shop program, multiple doors of entry. You can come in for any reason: homeless, substance abuse treatment, employment, education, family reunification, and we make a lifetime commitment to people, because what we try to build is a community of healers so people can heal from the trauma of incarceration.
So talk to us about the record that a person coming out of prison has that stops them from getting New York City public housing,
Yes.
has been stopping them from getting jobs. So now there is a cleansing of the record. So go into detail about how exactly that works, because in the old days, you had to confess, yes, I was in jail and I did X, Y, and Z before you even had an interview.
Yes, well, two things happened, right? A while ago, 23A, which is the law of the land now, that protects people with convictions from employment discrimination. And what the city council and the mayor, city council agreed to and the mayor signed, is fair chance for housing, which now gives protections to people with criminal convictions. As I said, there are 750,000 people in New York City with conviction records, 11% of the adult population. 80% of them are Black and Latino. So we're talking about generational collateral consequences for a conviction that no matter when it happened, you often experience trying to get housing or employment. And now we have protections where landlords cannot discriminate against someone just because they have a criminal conviction. Because here's the truth. A criminal conviction doesn't tell the landlord who's going to be a good tenant or not. It just doesn't. It doesn't tell them whether they're going to pay their rent. It doesn't tell them whether they're going to be a good neighbor. And so we said we shouldn't be using it. And then when you couple that with the percentage of people who are black and brown, what you're doing basically is eliminating black and brown opportunity for people to have stable housing. So Fair Chance for Housing is a great new law that we are working with the New York City Human Rights Commission as they build out the protections and the operations to make sure that this law is adhered to. And then on the state level, Governor Kathy Hochul signed the Clean Slate bill, which is amazing. I will benefit from that. My last conviction was in 1986. I still have my conviction. But thanks to Clean Slate, that conviction will be wiped from my record. It'll still be available to law enforcement, but that record I will get a clean slate after 34 years of paying my taxes, raising my family, and doing this work. I'm going to get a clean slate. So we have two victorious pieces of legislation that will make a profound difference for many people in New York.
And that clean slate goes into effect in January?
I think it goes into effect in January, yes.
And so that means when you go to apply for a job as well, right?
Yes.
Then tell us the point at which this conviction comes up. You don't have to now say,
right?
And they can't ask you?
Right now, because of 23A, you can't ask someone, have they been convicted?
Right.
What you have to do is evaluate them and interview them based on their presenting skills. And if you feel that the person is a skilled candidate, you can offer them a conditional offer of a letter of offer. And based on that, then you could do a background check. And only then, when you do the background check, you have to go, if you make a decision that you don't want to hire them, you have to go to what's called a fair chance process, where they have to demonstrate how the conviction directly impacts their ability to do the job. And so it really diminishes the discrimination that when you put on the application, yes, they put your application to the side.
Exactly, exactly.
So
talk to us about, you mentioned Governor Hochul. One of the things that she's done recently, and I appreciate your defending the city in a way to say that we're not as bad as most people make us out to be. But didn't she just order the troops into the New York City subway system? Explain that to us.
That's the challenge that we always find ourselves in. And what we've been saying at Fortune through our advocacy is we ask our political and elected leaders not to make decisions based on an instance or a couple of instances. Make a decision and make a recommendation based on where we want to go. And what we've seen is an horrific incident happens, and then our legislatures want to go and create a law around that particular instance. But as I said, there are 750,000 people in New York City with conviction records. There are thousands of people who came home and rebuilt their lives. If you want to make a law, talk to those folks and say, what do we need to do to continue to support pathways so that when people come home, they could have the similar experience as you. Those who violate our laws, we need to hold them accountable. But we shouldn't be creating laws and responding to that as if it is a massive problem that everybody with a conviction history is somehow creating havoc and injuring people. It's just not true, and we shouldn't do it.
Do you disagree with the troops going into the subway system?
I do, because what does it do? What does it really do? It's a great optics to show force, but it does nothing for safety in a way that we think about safety, right? We should be thinking about safety is how do we get at the root causes of people who need to go and steal, and how do we get at the root cause of people with mental illness who are on the trains and who are on the streets? how do we get to the root causes of people who don't have economic opportunity? And that's what Fortune does. And so we should be investing more in that. We should be investing more in the root causes so that we could truly have safe communities.
So, and what I think too is that the work needs to start a lot earlier. I mean,
Yes.
you were 10 years old when
Yes.
when you went off the rail, so to speak. The foster care system is like a definite, almost, what is it, 80% chance that if you go into foster care, you're on your way to prison. So I think that
It is a pathway.
these changes, the cure has to start at birth, even pre-birth,
Right.
in so many ways.
Right. And that's about investing, right? And as a society, we need to invest in the things that we know will make a difference. Early education, social supports for families who are struggling. We know where the root causes are, but are we bold enough to invest in the strategies that will address those root causes so that we truly cut off the pipeline from foster care to juvenile justice to adult criminal justice system? And so it is a question our elected leaders need to ask and respond to. Are they willing to be bold and invest in the right things?
And congratulations to you. In January, you will get your conviction erased. You're married. You have children, four
Yes.
children,
4 children,
grandchildren.
6 grandchildren, a lovely wife. My family has been my rock. My wife has been such a partner in this journey. When I first met her, the thing that really attracted me to her is that she didn't see me for all the bad I did and all that I've been through. She only seen me for who was standing before her and her mother. And that was both freeing for me, because I always thought that I would be judged by what I've done, and they didn't do that. And that created space for me to grow in some unbelievable ways. Believable now as I'm sitting
Right,
here,
right.
but I am truly blessed to have her in my life.
That is just incredible. And in terms of the Fortune Society, give us your 2024, 2025 goals.
Yes.
What do you want to see happen?
It's 4 things really, framed out of building on excellence. We have 56 years of excellence. We have grown from a grassroots small organization to an organization now that has services in every borough except Staten Island. We see 11,000 people. We have over 523 staff. 50% of our staff are people with justice histories. 40% of our exec team have justice histories. And so I want to build on that excellence. And there's 4 pillars that I'm focused on. One is people first leadership. And that's about supporting our staff and our leaders in the organization to continue to do the great work that they have been doing for generations. The second one is about service excellence and replication, sharing what we've learned, talking to other jurisdictions and other states about what we're doing and how we do it, how we combine advocacy and services, how our services inform our advocacy and our research. The third thing is around building out our David Rothenberg Center, public policy. As an organization, we capture and try to help people heal from the trauma. But as an organization, we have to stop the trauma from happening. And that means changing criminal justice policy so that it doesn't disproportionately impact so many Black and brown communities and leave them devastated in the wake of incarceration. And then the fourth piece is really inviting others who care about this issue to come join us and work side by side with us to continue to do this hard work and to elevate the voices of so many people who have been impacted and doing good work.
Well, you've got 4 terrific goals there. What's in your way? What's stopping you from creating all of those? You would say, and I know you're so good, you would say nothing is stopping us, but you've got roadblocks. We have just a couple of minutes to talk about what's in your way.
I think the biggest thing in our way is the will of the people to do the right thing. We far too often like to see a problem and then throw spaghetti on the wall and say that will solve the problem. And I think that's the biggest thing that's going to get in the way. Whether we are willing to stop the fear mongering, whether we are willing to stop the demonizing, whether we are willing to invest in the things that make a difference in people's lives, housing, employment, mental illness, substance abuse treatment. Our desire to do the right thing, I think, is the biggest obstacle. And I hope, as a leader of Fortune Society, to continue to put a face on the issue and to encourage our elected leaders to stop the fear mongering and let's get to work.
Well, Stanley Richards, can we put you in charge of world peace next too? You know, I think you're going to meet your goals, and you.
Well, thank you.
You are such. You know, the empathy that I feel for your life and your success, and I mean, it's just incredible. And I know that people who are watching this will feel the same way.
Thank you.
So glad that the Fortune Society hired you 33 years ago, because you're making a tremendous impact on so many other lives. And
thank you so much, Carol.
thank you so much for being with us today. Give my love to David.
I will.
Okay. Stanley is President and CEO of the Fortune Society. That is the program for us for now. Thanks to you for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we'll see you the next time.